Today is Wednesday, July the 20th, 2011. I'm Tony Casey.
I'm Buddy Rampton.
And I'm Heath Mulliken. Welcome to the Techology Show, a weekly podcast featuring technology, theology, and everything in between. This is the world's only user antagonistic podcast, and this is episode 116.
Woo-hoo. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
As you can see, the boy Wonder is out of the studio today, so that leaves me behind the controls, which is a very scary thing.
You'll do fine.
Yeah. Hey, listen, we want to welcome first Buddy into our studio. Many of you know Buddy Rampy. He's our illustrious district superintendent. He is my boss, Heath's boss.
The illustrious.
And he is pinch hitting for Steve Stanley. So, Buddy, we welcome you to the show this morning.
Glad to be here. I certainly cannot equal Steve Stanley.
Yeah. But you can try.
Now, buddy,
I won't even try.
Now, buddy, you just came from Table Rock, and they're having kids camp this week. Just want to make sure that my two girls are okay and they're safe and sound and not getting in any trouble.
Don't know for sure.
Okay, that's not a very
I've
good.
shown up for a couple of meals, and I was at the rally last night, so that's about all I can tell you. Everything looked under control at that point.
Also, we want to welcome to the show this morning Richard Hall. Richard Hall is also a colleague in ministry. He has been at the Eden Wesleyan Church in Chesney, South Carolina for the last 18 years. He's been married to Sharon for 30 years, and together they have three wonderful children, Lauren, who's 28, Brian, 26, and Kaylee, who's 15. Richard, we welcome you to the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad that, again, Richard is kind of pinch hitting for us. We were actually sitting in a meeting on Saturday, and I wrote him a note, hey, can you join us on the show? And he looked at me without knowing what it meant and said, sure.
Yeah, it was a day later. I came back and said, by the way, what am I doing here?
Yeah, and we didn't say anything to one another for like a couple days, and then you come up to me, hey, by the way, what in the world does this mean?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Watch the show a lot. Don't get to watch it every week, but watch it a lot. So I knew what the show was about, and the more that I thought about it, I was like, wait a minute, what in the world am I doing on here?
Oh, we're going to have a good time with you. Listen, just some business to take care at the top of the hour. Some of our viewers have recognized that one of the things that's happening with Ustream is that they're getting commercials during the podcast, and there's nothing we can do about that. I know last week or 2 weeks ago we had I think there were 3 commercials that happened during the podcast, and the only thing we can tell you is that we're looking into alternatives, other places to host the show for live streaming. At this point, this is just an economical choice for us. Free is our favorite kind here at the Technology Show, and so we apologize for that, but at this point, we're just going to have to put up with it. All right, let's jump in here. Richard, would love to ask you a few questions. I know that you have been in ministry for over 24 years now, or you're in your 24th year of ministry. And one of the things I love to ask people that have been in ministry for 2 decades or longer is, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen since coming into the ministry?
You know, Tony, as I think about that, and I looked at this question you were going to ask, I think there's 100 different ways you could go with this for sure. I think I had this conversation with maybe you and Pastor Buddy just recently. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, we were having conversations about district scheduling and stuff because of the interruption it made to Sunday night services at church. So many churches don't even, we don't have Sunday night service anymore. I know here at Eden, several years ago, we went away from a traditional Sunday night service to we do what we call life groups on Sunday night. I mean, it's still church, but it's totally non-traditional. It's kind of taken the place of Sunday school. But we meet in different homes. We do have a couple groups that meet here at the church, those kind of things. And so this whole view of church, I think, has changed, but probably, if I think about it, is changing rapidly right in front of us. I never wear a suit to preach in anymore. I love that. It's just that whole concept of what is church and those kind of things. And I think there's been a lot of guys before us that have kind of blazed that trail. I think one of the things, and this is a little thing, but I think one of the things that I've seen is when I first came here to Eden 18 years ago, I mean, it was almost kind of expected that, I'm the preacher, I'm supposed to visit you. So I just drop by your house. I just show up, knock on the door. Hey, I'm here to visit you. And honestly, I think if I did that to a lot of people in our church now, they would quit coming here for fear that I might come by.
Well, Richard, don't you think that part of this is generational? So there still is a generation that would love for you to drop in on them.
Yeah, for sure. No doubt.
Yeah.
And I mean I think all of this stuff is generational, but I do think it says something about, and I'm not the bright one to figure it all out. I just see it happening. I do think it says a lot about our perception of church and what church is, what it's, what we expect out of church, those kind of things. Those things are definitely changing.
It's interesting you talk about dress. You started out there, you were wearing a suit and tie on Sunday morning. You don't do that anymore. Now, buddy, we've had this conversation, and more and more pastors are going this route from a district superintendent point of view. I mean, what's some of the stuff that you hear? Because again, there's still a generation. That's what they want to see. They want to see the suit and tie, and I guess for them it's an issue of professionalism.
Yeah, it's just what they've grown up with, what they've been accustomed to their whole lives going to church. On Sunday, you absolutely wore your best. I mean, that's just what you did. And then there was a spiritual component of that said, we're going to church, we're going to worship God. You absolutely wear the best that you can because of that. So somehow they not only see it as a cultural thing, but it's disrespectful to the worship service and to coming to worship if you aren't dressed that way. So, I mean, that takes it even to another level.
Heath, I'm interested from your point of view now. Do you wear a suit and tie or collared shirt? I mean, what's your dress in the pulpit?
When I first moved to Pennsylvania, we kind of wore a shirt and tie. That's what the pastor Mike McClung did. When I moved to Denton, lost the tie. I actually started wearing jeans a little bit in Denton because that's what everybody wore there. And when I moved to Oakway, that was probably the biggest thing I struggled with, because for the first few weeks I'd wear khakis or dress pants and a shirt, maybe a tie or a golf shirt, and just was really praying about it. And I was really, you can ask just different people I talked with about it. I mean, I agonized over what I should wear because 90% of my congregation was in jeans and T-shirts and stuff like that, and so I started. I remember the first Sunday I wore jeans and a nice shirt. It was just kind of like, once I kind of got that over my mind, and I just felt the Lord say, "Hey, just be yourself." It's like He took I don't even know the word. It's like I felt a lot more comfortable, and I could really be myself. But I honestly walked to church that morning thinking they're gonna get rid of me. That today's my last day. This is it. I'm always over. And I wore one of those. I don't want to get in trouble here. I wore one of those like designer shirts.
I think. Well, no, I thought you were gonna tell me you wore a muscle shirt and say no. That very inappropriate, Heath.
No. But I wore one of those designer shirts, and because that's what all the pastors were wearing, And I had more compliments on that. I think that took away from the fact that I was wearing jeans. And I haven't worn that shirt since.
Richard, I wonder, how has outreach changed over the last quarter century? I mean, from the time you started in ministry, not just when you got to Eden, but when you started in ministry, even before then. I mean, all of us here have gone to either Bible college or a liberal arts Christian college. And so how has outreach changed over this time?
And it's weird. I know for us here, we, I hear people talk about, the idea of bus ministry died, 20 years ago. We run a bus and van every Wednesday night. And we run a van on Sunday mornings. But on Wednesday night, we'll bring in anywhere between 40 and 50 kids.
Wow.
Every week. And so, that's still, in a sense, that's the same thing I was doing, 20 years ago. That part of it really hasn't changed. And so, but the whole idea of outreach, we did we did a breakfast. We've started a new. We've targeted 4 specific times that we're going to do community outreach. I mean, obviously more than that, but these are like, we try to make these big deals. We do it on New Year's, Easter, the 4th of July, and around Halloween we do a fall festival. And I mean, we just did our 4th of July thing, and we probably had around 175 to 200 people here, of which probably probably a good 40 to 50% of those were just community folks that just showed up because we were giving away free food and shooting off fireworks and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget back when we were doing the New Year's breakfast. We had prepared this huge breakfast. We had advertised it in the community, and there was a guy walking down the road in front of our church. And one of our guys went out and said, "Hey, man, come on in and we'll feed you free breakfast. We've got boxes of food that we're giving away, sending home with you. We just want to bless you and your family." And he says, I'll pick you up in my car, take you down here to the church. You can get a meal and food, and I'll be glad to take you back wherever you're going. And the guy declined. He was like, "Nah, I don't want to go down there to the church." And it was like there's this mistrust of, if I go down there, they're probably going to preach to me, and what. I mean, I don't know what this guy thought, but I was shocked that guy has stuck in my mind for this entire year because of the distrust that people have towards the church and what the church is going to expect out of them or ask of them. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing, and I think outreach is changing in that way. I mean, I think when we talk about outreach and trust, I think people used to have this blanket trust of the church, and I'm not sure that they have that completely anymore.
Well, we've had that conversation here over and over again, that the idea coming out of the 40s and 50s is, if you build it, they will come. People are going to gravitate to the church. And clearly the paradigm now is the highways and the hedges, that we're not just going to build a place and they're going to come. We're going to have to go out to where they are, where they live life, and we have to build relationships and minister to them in that context.
We actually do 2 big events a year with other churches in our community, and we do a trunk or treat at the elementary school because none of the churches are big enough to really hold it. We had over 2,000 people come to that.
Wow.
That was like 6 churches. And then our Easter thing, we had to move it because of weather, so we didn't have as many people. We still had 700 people, and that was at the high school. And we're very fortunate where we're at that the schools look to partner with us. I mean, the schools want to provide a safe place for their kids to come and for people to be. But I think a few people in our church were like, "Well, why aren't we doing it at the church?" I'm like, "Well, we can't fit 2,000 people in our parking lot. Would you rather have an event for 200 at our church or 2,000 at the school that's a mile away?"
Buddy, wouldn't you say that part of the change that we're beginning to see is that instead of churches just trying to work independently, the idea that we're working together as churches to build the kingdom? I think a lot of proprietary stuff is beginning to fall by the wayside, which I think is probably a positive thing.
Oh yeah, it's definitely there's more of an attitude. We made a trip to the lower part of the state and wanted to contact some people down there looking at planning a church. And we contacted a couple of people, and you know what? They couldn't have been more helpful. They were so excited about somebody else having interest in coming. How can we help? We just want to be a part of this whole thing. There's plenty of unreached people to go around. So, yeah, without question. But there's and then just on this outreach thing, it's definitely the shift is, instead of come, it's go. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's just the simplistic hit. And the other thing, Richard, I think that you mentioned is preconceptions people have about church has changed pretty dramatically, over a period of time, and that's one of the reasons why they aren't interested in coming. It's just their preconceptions, their experiences. They had bad experiences. The church is boring. People are judgmental. Those kinds of things. So that's where people are thinking, and those are the preconceptions, and we have to move past those and to go to them.
Richard, I wonder if I were to send you a young lady studying for ministry, and you were going to put 2 or 3 books in her hand about ministry. What are the books that you would recommend, and why?
It's interesting that you use the word young lady. This one
Or a
I've
young
had some
man.
fun thinking about, because as soon as I read this question, there was one book that immediately came to mind, and that is the book Simple Church. I've read that book at least 2 times. I've probably skimmed through it several more. It's a book that really changed my focus about church and why we do church. I think we live in this world, and this has been one of my frustrations as a pastor, is we live in this world where I think we save people to the church. I mean, you go out, you meet somebody, they're having a rough time in life, and they say something, and I think I know what they mean, but they say something like this. They say, I know I need to get back in church. Well, I want to say to them, no, you don't. I mean, yeah, you need to get back in church, but what you need is a relationship with Jesus that's going to change your life. And I hope that they're equating getting back in church with that. So I understand that. But I think so many times we've become so busy with 14,000 little programs and all this stuff at the church that we're so busy going to church and we don't have time to love our neighbor. And, so I think the first book that I would recommend would be Simple Church. That one was an easy one for me to pick. And I've already had people that, that I'm working with, and I'll say, hey, you need to read this book. The next one, and I struggle with this a little bit. I toss this all around trying to figure out. I ask other people. And I know that there's some probably way more deeply theological books or whatever that are available. But I think one of the book that I would recommend, another book that I've read multiple times, is Courageous Leadership by Bill Hybels.
Oh, love that book. Love that book. Yeah.
Great book.
He made a statement in there. I mean, he made lots of statements in there. The book's laying here beside me, and it's marked up to the point of hardly being able to be read. But I'll never forget when he said in there, he said when he used to hire people based on their abilities, thinking that he could improve on their character.
Yeah.
And later in life, he flipped that entirely, saying, you know what, I'm going to hire you for character, and I'll develop your abilities.
Right.
Yeah, let me interrupt here, buddy. You and I have had conversations about that. So, what do you think about that section of the book?
Absolutely. The 3 C's: competence, chemistry, and character. And those are the 3 things that you do in bringing on staff and in choosing your leadership. I think a lot of pastors, they don't have the opportunity to hire staff, but you do have the opportunity to pick your leadership team that may not be paid. But those are the things you're looking for. And the other thing is you cannot make the decision to hire on the basis of potential. That's the only other thing I would add to Hybels. The past is the best predictor of the future. So.
Now, Richard, how would you, to a ministry student, how would you advise them to balance their reading between strategy and kind of character development reading? I find myself a lot of times I lean a little too heavily toward the strategy part. I need to get more obviously into God's word, but then other things. What would you say to a ministry student about that?
Oh yeah, well that was one thing, and I just assumed that of the 3 books that we would say was a must read, that the Bible would have been understood.
Good answer, Richard. Good answer. But listen, I mean, doesn't this? Go ahead, Richard. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think Heath has I think it's a great question. I mean, and I don't know, for me personally, it has kind of ran in cycles. There'll be times when I really get into just really inspirational, faith-building, rah-rah, kind of go-get-'em kind of books. Right. And then there'll be times that I get into the strategy books of, how to build your church without destroying it or something. There was a book that I read, and obviously I don't think that's the right title, but it's close.
It's close.
There definitely does need to be a balance. I think we can. Let's be honest. I mean, I think we can learn the strategy. We can never build the church without the help of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. I was going to say as soon as Heath mentioned what he did about he says that he leans towards strategy. I mean, that is the church. That is what we do. And so while we say that spiritual formation is important, and we pay it lots of lip service, at the end of the day, our default seems to be strategy, and we have to discipline ourselves to do the spiritual formation stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Correct.
Well, and see, that's where I'll be honest, the third book that I had to choose, you said, what, 3 books did you assign for them? Because for me, the last book that I read is going to be one of what I think is a great book. I just finished reading Christian Atheist by Craig Groeschel.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished reading Primal by Batterson and Soul Print by Batterson. And those are all great books. And probably if I had a ministerial student that showed up, within the next, month or two, those are going to be books that I hand them. They're fresh on my mind, so I'm going to be able to follow up with them and share with them. Probably a book, and I struggled. There's one book that I didn't have on my list, and Sharon reminded me of it this morning when I asked her this question. Was a book by, I think it's Stephen Covey, Who Moved My Cheese?
Oh, yeah.
And that's one book that I have recommended to untold people. So that would probably be, it would be Who Moved My Cheese, Christian Atheist by Groeschel's great. I just, In the Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day is probably one of my favorite books of all time that I've read, in the last 6 months. I've bought a bunch of copies and handed them out to other people. So that's kind of where I fall on that third book. But the Who Moved My Cheese is one that I read years ago, but it really, really, really impacted me about saying, you know what, I run into struggles and somebody moves my cheese, but I don't give up, quit, go. I've got to figure out another way to get around this and move forward.
Yeah, very good. Just curious, Richard, who are your heroes?
I would have to say my parents. I come from an incredible Christian heritage. I am so blessed to have a great Christian heritage. Mom and Dad, my grandparents were great Christians. My uncle's a Bible Methodist pastor down in Stanton, Alabama, and he has been since my childhood one of my heroes. His character of life and the way that he lives his life has just been amazing to me. Ken Gorvette, who got me started in the ministry, is one of my heroes. The list could go on, but probably if I had to narrow it down, I would probably say people like my uncle. His name is John Ingram. I would say, or Ken Gorvette, some of those guys who really poured their life into me, and I'm who I am today because of what they did for me.
I'm really surprised, Richard, because we all thought you were going to say Heath Mulliken.
I was going to say Buddy Rampy, but it wasn't helping me. One of the questions I said I was going to ask you is, if you could have a redo in ministry, how would you use it? Wow. Now, I'm mad at you for asking me this question. I read this email at like 11 o'clock I think on Monday night, and I don't think I went to sleep till about 2 because I was thinking about this. You know what? Here's the answer that I came up with. And this, I hope everybody understands this. If I could have a redo in ministry, I think I would be me more. God called me. He knew my personality. He knew who I was. He knew everything about me. And I think so many times, and I want everybody to like me. And I realize, and if you know me at all, I'm going to try to respond to people with tact and with care and with love. And
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I thought I lost you there for a second. No. I lost my end. And as I look at that, I think I spent way too many times. I think the Holy Spirit would, kind of prompt me or lead me to make some decisions or do some stuff. And too many times I was afraid to step out in faith because I was afraid, people are not going to like this. They're going to think this is a dumb idea or whatever. And if I could have a redo in ministry, and I realize I'm getting older and I've been at this a little longer, and now I'm a little braver, I suppose. But God calls us, and He knows us when He calls us, and He calls us with a reason. Don't be afraid to be you. Don't be afraid to be me. And I think a lot of times, especially in my early ministry, I'd throw something out there, and if it wasn't received very well, I'd back away from it immediately and say, okay, well, we're just not going to do that. And I'm not saying I would get, say, I don't care what you think, we're going to do what I want to do. No. But don't be afraid to be who you are. I mean, Heath talked about this just a moment ago with the whole, what am I going to dress in when I go to church on Sunday morning? I mean, we put so much bondage on ourselves sometimes that I think that we limit the ability of the Holy Spirit to react in our life. And I know that's been me. That has been me. And if I was able to go back, know what I know now, and do a redo, I think that's one thing I'd do more.
Isn't part of that as a result of 20, 30 years ago, especially when we were coming up through college and Bible school? I mean, this was kind of what was presented to us. And what I mean by that is kind of a cookie-cutter approach. This is the way it needs to be. And really the emphasis was not authenticity. That's and isn't that part of what you're talking about here, authenticity?
Oh, absolutely it is. I mean, and especially in a rural church. I mean, I pastor a very rural church. Statistics will say that a lot of people in a rural church look at the pastor as the hired hand. I mean, they hire people to work in the peach orchard, to pick the strawberries, to do whatever. That's what happens around me. And they just see the pastor as, okay, we pay you to marry, bury, and, dress in a suit and preach to us on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. And that whole lack of authenticity is absolutely present.
Yeah, I know that Heath in our pre-show, he was talking about the rural church and kind of identifying with that. I guess you would agree at this point. Yeah.
Sorry, I was chatting. Sorry.
I
agree.
Get off Facebook, Heath.
I concur.
Yeah, I'm thinking that he wouldn't agree at this point. No, I mean, Richard was just talking about a lot of times in a rural context, the pastor is seen as the hired hand.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing, and it's like this in a lot of Wesleyan churches in our district. If you look back, many of them were founded in the late 1890s, early 1900s. If you look over their history, the pastor only stayed there a year or two. Mm-hmm. A lot of that was because of the circuit. A lot of that was just for various reasons. And so the pastor wasn't seen as the guy casting the vision for the church. He was there to preach. He was there to minister.
Right.
And so by virtue of default, there was this leadership vacuum that the church boss fell into. I mean, church bosses didn't come into existence because you had grumpy old men who just wanted to run everything. They saved the churches. I mean, if they hadn't been there, what would have happened? But what's happened is we've had this transition over the last 20 years into pastors are staying longer, pastors are more of a leader and a shepherd, and but there is a little bit of a battle there because you're just kind of,
well, Keith, if I might throw in, I just found this incredibly interesting. Eden was founded on March the 18th, 1900. Mm-hmm. I've been here for 18 years. I'm in my 18th year.
Right.
The next longest serving pastor was here for 9 years. After that, it was 6 years. And for the entire history of this church, no pastor stayed more than 4 years. It was normally 2 to 3 years, and they were changing a pastor every 2 to 3 years for the entire history of this church.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty typical if you look across. He's correct. If you look through the history of the churches and see pastoral tenure, that was very true up until the probably 70s. A couple of things I think, Heath, this whole idea of the pastor, we pay the pastor to do the work of ministry. That's not just rural.
Right.
That's cultural South.
Yeah.
That
point.
Translates across, those kinds of boundaries. The other thing is the authenticity, I think, is just a reflection of, there again, a change that it was not safe to be authentic. I mean, the last place you were going to be real and authentic was in the church back in those earlier days. So now I've always said to the congregations that the best gift they gave to me was the ability to be authentic and real,
Mhm.
and they could still accept me. And so, but that wouldn't have been true years ago. And again, it's just a whole change in terms of how people, you put on your best clothes and your best face
Right.
and everything when you come to church. It's not a place where you can let your guard down and be real.
Right. I don't know
Very
if
good.
you've read this book, Richard. It's by Shannon Odell, Transforming Church in Rural America, where it tells a story. He went from a big church in California to this small rural church in Arkansas. I think the population of the town was like 100 or less than 100. And I like the book because with the book, there's links to videos online where he takes you, he'll tell a story and he'll take you to that place, and you can see the building that he was trying to have remodeled. And, that church now has multiple campuses. They're running over, 1,000 people. But he talks about some of the battles. It's like, did this guy read all of our mail? Because it's the same story you hear at a lot of small churches, and just how he kind of fought those battles and how he got people on board with the new vision. They actually changed the name of the church to Brand New Church. That's the name of their church.
Nice.
And, but that book's a great read.
Richard, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be grilled by us. Going to ask you to stay on for the rest of the show, and later on you'll be having a piece here in They Said It, but also, we just want you to jump into the conversation. And again, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's an honor. Thanks, guys.
All righty. Well, it is that time of the show. So let's see. I'm trying to get where I need to be here. I think this is the button I need to push.
Download of the week.
Our download of the week is Amazon Watcher. So anyone here amongst us use Amazon Watcher?
No.
Nope.
All right.
Nope.
Great little tool. What this is you download it to your PC or your Mac, and let's say there's a device that you want to buy, but it's not the price that you want to pay. So maybe it comes out at $499, and you say to yourself, you know what? If that thing got down to $399, I'd buy it. So you can download Amazon Watcher, load that particular item on Amazon Watcher, and it will keep you updated when there is a drop in price on a particular item.
Wow.
And so this way you're not having to go back. If you're anything like me, before Amazon Watcher, you just went back to Amazon, or I go to Amazon all the time now, so I don't know what other people do. But you'd go back and check the price over and over again. With Amazon Watcher, no need to do that. It'll just keep you updated, and you can see the price of your item. And when it gets to that magical price where you'll buy it, then you can go ahead and lock in.
Now, I do use the Amazon app on my, I think it's called Amazon Price Check on my iPhone. And it's actually saved me a lot of money, because if I'm at Walmart and I see like a DVD or a Blu-ray I want to buy, I'll scan it, and it shows you the prices on Amazon. And a lot of times, if the price on Amazon is cheaper, I ended up not buying it at Walmart, and then I ended up not buying it altogether because I realized I don't really need that. But it's been a huge help, because if you're shopping for something like a treadmill or something that is more expensive than a Blu-ray or DVD.
Speaking of Amazon, let me say this too. I've talked about this on the show, but I would throw this out there. I pay $79 a year for the Amazon Prime membership. Yeah. That seems pricey, but what has happened, I've had that for almost 4 years now, and what has happened in our home is there has been a huge cultural shift to where a lot of the things that we buy now, we buy through Amazon. Number one, because you're probably not going to beat the price. Number two, with the Prime membership, it is delivered to your home in 48 hours. And I did a little bit of math. Before I had the Amazon Prime membership, I probably made at least 2 trips to Greenville every month to some kind of tech store or something like that. So a Best Buy or the computer store over on Lawrence Road. I mean, again, a couple times a month. I no longer make those trips. So I've and this is what I say. that $79, I spent more than that in gas, either going to Walmart in Easley or going to tech stores in Greenville. And with that now, Amazon Prime members get there are certain rentals, movie rentals, for free. And we have a Wi-Fi enabled flat panel TV, so that stuff streams right to our flat panel TV, or obviously it can stream to any device that you have, computer device. So I would really put that out there. I think the $79, that is money well spent. And for us, I mean, it saves us money. I mean, our 13-year-old now, when she wants something, she goes to Amazon, and then she brings me the money and says, Dad, I'm going to order this. And so I just would highly recommend that. All right, let's move on to They Said It.
Read my lips.
I'm going to say this again.
I've never taken steroids or HGH.
I took the initiative in creating the internet.
The Macintosh, of all the machines I've ever seen, is the only one that meets that standard.
I'm not a crook.
If you know what you're doing here, slide out.
I was shocked, especially by the dramatic changes in the last 10 years. I thought fame would be important, but did not expect this drastic an increase or such a dramatic increase in other values, such as community feeling. If you believe that television reflects the culture as I do, then American culture has changed drastically. Yalda T. Ulls, a UCLA doctoral student in developmental psychology and the lead author of the study that says popular TV shows teach children fame is most important value and kids are listening. Source: Lab Spaces.
The inadvertent effect of all this is that most pastors have become heads of personality cults. Churches become identified more with the pastor, this is such and such's church, than with anything larger. When that pastor leaves or is forced to leave, it's devastating. It feels like a divorce or a death in the family. So symbiotic is today's relationship between pastor and people. Mark Gaye, in his article, The Most Risky Professional, Why You Need to Pray Desperately for Your Pastor. Source: Christianity Today.
They were like the dinosaur that saw the ice age coming but didn't think it was going to hit them. Bankruptcy attorney Schuler Carroll commenting on the bankruptcy and eventual closure of Borders, the second largest U.S. bookstore chain. Source: Reuters.
This complaint was brought to the General Medical Council, the GMC, not by the patient, who has continued to be a patient in this practice, but by the patient's mother. Medical doctor Richard Scott, upon hearing that he was under investigation by the GMC because he told one of his 24-year-old patients that he found Jesus helped him. Source: News Corps.
All right, let's just start with this last story that Richard read. This is outrageous. I mean, when you read this, it's laughable. Mm-hmm. So you have this medical doctor who talks about, to his patient, talks about how he feels like Jesus helps him. The patient is not at all offended whatsoever. He goes home, and he's 24 years old. He goes home and tells his mama, and now there's an investigation.
I'm thinking about this, and that was immediately what I thought was, okay, wait a second. This guy's 24 years old, and his mama is still out there raising Cain and trying to protect her boy. I mean, Mama, I love you, but don't go messing with my doctor.
That's funny.
It's crazy. And I think in the end, when you read this story, I'm convinced that probably nothing will come of it. But nonetheless, it's outrageous. And her reaction to this goes to a point that we have made on this show. I believe that this is part of the influence of the new atheism, where the new atheism is not about dialogue, it's about seek and destroy.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And that's what you see here. All right, we have 3 other stories. We can jump in anywhere here.
Let me tell you, the first one that I read about fame is I've got two 7-year-old daughters. I got 3 kids, and they see. Let's say we're watching Disney Channel. They see a girl who, let's just say Selena Gomez, who great girl, whatever. She's got a show. She's singing. She's in movies. She's got about 10 different things going on, and That's all my girls and my son too. They'll be like singing and dancing and they talk about being famous. And we live in a society where you put up one good YouTube video and you are famous. I mean, you think about it. There was a group of guys, you know their show, you know their movies, and they became famous riding shopping carts through parking lots and eating disgusting things and, you know, getting flipped over in porta-johns and, you know, but they're famous. And that's the culture we live in, and it's scary, very, very scary.
Sure is.
Yeah, well, and then you also have, I mean, how many of us have laughed at the YouTube video of the boy after the dentist office? You know, he's kind of punch drunk because of the medication, and YouTube contacted the father to say, I don't know if you understand how revenue sharing works here, but this thing is going viral and you are not officially registered. You've got money to make. And so, I mean, this goes to your point, Heath, that we live in this day and age where you don't need a producer anymore. If you can get that one, you know, freak video that goes viral, you are going to be a success. And I think for us, I mean, what's alarming about this study, this is not opinion. This is a study by a doctoral student. And these are not the values. I mean, these are not the values. It is not the outer package. It is not popularity. It is not fame that the Word of God values. What the Word of God values is the inner character of individuals, and that's what's important. And that's what's disturbing about this study.
Well, there's go ahead.
Go ahead, Richard.
How and I don't mean to muddy the water, but how does this story tie in with the story we talked about first there about the doctor? I mean, what Heath said was, it said there was this dramatic increase in this value of fame and a dramatic decrease in other values. I think, even when I think of this first story, it's, you know, why would the GMC, the General Medical Council, when somebody comes to them and says, hey, my doctor told my 24-year-old son that he thinks Jesus helped him, and they go, yeah, that's something we probably ought to look into.
Yeah,
I'm like, are you kidding?
Yeah, what influences them to even come to that decision?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a girl. Her name's either Jessica White or Jessica Black. Something. About a few months ago, she came out for her birthday. Her parents paid for her to have a song recorded in a video called Friday. This thing went viral.
Yeah.
They sell the song, and she just came out in the last week with her new song. I haven't watched it because Friday, I lost brain cells watching.
Well, and my understanding was that it wasn't even that good. It just became a viral phenomenon.
It became a viral phenomenon because it was so painfully bad. I mean, because it was just like the most cheesy, vanilla. I mean,
wait a minute. Let's hop on this train. I mean, we are four pastors. We could write the song Monday, couldn't we? I mean, come on. That song.
It's already been written. Rainy days and Monday.
Well, I'm thinking more. You know, the title of ours is Monday's Crash and Burn. I mean, it's something like that.
Oh my goodness.
Hey, the Christianity article, very interesting. There really were two articles last month in Christianity Today where they're beginning to talk about the sins of the pastor, but in the past, you know, they talk about these scandalous things of pastors who had to step down because of financial indiscretion or immoral conduct, sexually immoral conduct. And now this whole thing is about how pastors are stepping down or setting aside, and the issue that they're struggling with is pride. This particular author, Mark Gallier, he talks about churches where, you know, these pastors' egos are pumped up because, you know, they're so identified with the church. And certainly part of what we've seen within the church culture is less emphasis on denomination and structure, more emphasis at the local level. So, just really curious what you guys think of this one.
Yeah, Tom Rainer's book, Surprising Insights from the Unchurched and Proven Ways to Reach Them. Now, this is not how people get to church initially. That's still because they're invited. But 13 top reasons that unchurched people choose a church, in other words, after they come and visit.
Yeah.
And number one, 90% is the pastor and preaching.
Yeah.
So, you know, that speaks to this, definitely.
This quote hits me in a different way because I've pastored at two of the churches that I've pastored at. In their history, has seen a huge increase in attendance when bringing on a musical staff person that brought a crowd with them, a crowd that had followed them from place to place, and then when that person left, that group of people went with them.
Yeah.
And so I have seen, I remember when I went to Denton, they had a couple of years where they were either pushing 500, over 500, and then when I got there, right around 300, I'm like, what in the world? And they had literally brought in a new choir director who brought the entire choir from his previous church.
Wow.
And when he left, it changed the whole dynamic of the church. And when he left, they left. And I've seen that. If you knew my situation, I'm in a very unique situation where I'm at now. But I totally agree that maybe that's even more prevalent in the rural setting where there's family involved.
Well, what about this quote here? I mean, he says they've become heads of personality cults. I mean, it's strong language.
Yeah, but it's true.
Extremely strong.
Yeah. I would say that is so.
I think
it'll be interesting to watch this because we have a lot of our flagship churches and denomination. The pastors are getting closer to the point of retiring. So what's going to happen in those? And I just again kudos to Wayne Smith. Who made that transition so beautifully and recognizing the changes in his community and the emphasis to reach out and make the church multi-ethnic, that he then had a pastor of ethnicity to come and is the one who followed him, and it's just been seamless there. So it can be done, but, there's a lot of these places going to be interesting where you have strong personalities to see how that church now transitions to the next leader.
And Wayne Smith went out on top. A lot of pastors get to that point.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 or 4 years out of retirement, and I don't know what happens, but there's a coasting. Fred Andrews did the same thing. Fred Andrews went out on top, didn't coast those last few years, and I think it is going to be interesting to see how that, and not just in our denomination, but you think about Bill Hybels and Rick Warren, these big churches. What's gonna happen there?
I felt like the article suffered a little bit from lack of understanding in the light of history. I'm not sure that this is a new phenomena. I'm not sure that the church hasn't seen this before. I think of 20 years ago, Dr. Don Joy was doing research on ministers who fall, and he was talking about sexual sin. But I mean, one of the things he talked about were that the common denominator with every one of these pastors that he was dealing with was they had become a personality within their church. The church was highly independent. There was really no structure over them, and so the danger of what happens when we're put in a situation like that is that there are no checks and balances in our lives. And this isn't just a church issue. I mean, this is life in general. In my thinking, that this is what happens when there is no structure over us. When we are, in essence, we become a law unto ourselves, which is crazy to say that in the church, but that can happen. And I don't think that this is new, myself.
Well, and don't you think too, Tony? And of course, we're all pastors, so I mean, I'm not trying to throw rocks at us, but at the same time, I've been here at Eden for 18 years. And, with that, you begin to put people in leadership around you, or you don't put them there, but you end up, you have a lot of influence in the church. And frankly, as pastors, we like that.
Right. And you get those people in leadership that you feel like are going to lead the church. And I mean, I could see that happen with you, Richard, like when your people came up to you at camp meeting and they referred to you as Pope. I mean, I knew then that the transition had been made.
Listen, they were instructed that there was a specific terminology that they were using.
All right. What was there? One more story there
about Borders books.
Oh, yeah. Oh, listen, I am fascinated by this because if you remember a few weeks ago, I made reference to a tech podcast where Om Malik was the guest. He is the creator of the website GigaOM, and about a month ago in an interview, he said that, 20 years ago when the internet came out, this is what we said: systems drive networks. In other words, businesses determine how networks are going to work, and they begin to implement them. He said, it is a new day. We are 20 years down the road. He said that is not the case anymore. Networks now drive systems. And Amazon got it. They understood that. And the reason Borders is closing their door and liquidating is because they are not a network-driven business. And I think this has ramifications not just for business. I think it has ramifications for education. I think it has ramifications for the church. I mean, we are at this tipping point now where the question isn't, do you or do you not want to be part of network technology? The question is, when are you going to jump in and become? Because if you don't, you are going to be squeezed out.
I thought of the quote when I read this of something I used in my report at district conference, and from David Bosch in Transforming Mission. I think I got this from Phil Struckmeyer initially. The church, one ought to say that the church is always in a state of crisis, and that its greatest shortcoming is that it is only occasionally aware of it. And I've just got to say that is absolutely the truth. I don't know of a group anywhere that's in bigger denial than the church. My friend Jim Dunn, the first time I ever heard him say happy talk, I said, okay, I've been listening to that for a long time from denominational leaders, from district leaders, happy talk, and not taking the time to really look and see where we are and what is happening, just in a state of denial. And apparently that was the case with Borders, and look what happened. Yeah. And it will be true of the church as we know it. Another interesting question that I'll wait and save that. It's not directly related to this, but a good question I want to toss out. But I'll say.
Oh, go ahead. Just toss it out.
I was sharing with my son Matt, Tony, some of your research relating to the church and our non-existence and lack of participation at all in the civil rights movement, not just in the South. And here was his question. And so he said, okay, 50 years from now, people that are looking back at the church, what are they going to say? How in the world did they miss that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have one ready answer for that. I think, and Richard, you know this because you sat in on some of the seminars I did last week. I think the issue of immigration in our country right now, and what's happening is we are letting politics dictate the dialogue on this, and the church is not on stage. They are not grabbing a microphone. In the state of South Carolina, I'll just speak for the state that I live in, there's legislation already on the books signed by the governor that says this, that if Tony Casey is driving down the road and he picks up an undocumented worker to take them to the grocery store, Tony Casey can now be charged. And so what we have in South Carolina is literally law that says I cannot practice Christian charity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of those issues now. I mean, there may be multiple others as well.
Is that the new slavery? I mean, obviously there's slavery all around the world.
Well,
what's the difference in, we used to count African Americans as half a person. Well, isn't that what we're doing to...
Steve Stanley would argue that he sees some forms of modern slavery in this. Also, too, I think that, again, Richard, I'm sorry you have to hear this for the second time in a week, but Georgia passed similar legislation. I don't know how many people know that has been repealed in Georgia. One of the things that they didn't think through in the legislation is they made immigration law so tough there that a lot of migrant workers have simply stayed out of South Georgia. If you know anything about South Georgia, it's agricultural, and crops have literally been rotting in the fields. Yeah. And here's the wage that they're paying. $8 an hour is the low. The high is $11.50 in an hour, and they cannot get Anglos to come out and work at that wage. And so people who say that, undocumented workers make it so the system doesn't work, it's just not true. Right. They make the system work, and the country needs to adjust to that. And I just wish the church would become part of this argument. Going back to, Buddy's question, or that Matt asks, I mean, what are the issues 50 years from now that we're going to have to confess, And here's the beauty for those, the four of us, we know the history of the Wesleyan Church. Yeah. When you get to our founding, there's nothing to be ashamed of. As a matter of fact, we're out in the forefront saying culture is not where it ought to be, and so let's take the principles of the Word of God and let's direct people in that direction. Yeah.
We need. It's very, very sad to me. On Facebook, there's a Luther Lee and there's an Orange Scott, and they're trying to make changes in the denomination. And to me, it almost sullies these men's good name, because when Orange Scott stood up, he stood up for. He wasn't trying to make denominational change. He was trying to stand up for what was right. It didn't have anything to do with the denomination. It had to do with right and wrong, and we need voices like that. Yeah. Not to say, well, the USF is too. We need people to talk about. You said it at district conference. Love how you said it. Is we need bigger problems, and we're talking about nitpicky thing. I mean, 100 years from now, is it really going to matter the membership requirement of not drinking? No, but it will matter if we're on the right or wrong side of the immigration issue. And that's we just got to have people that stand up and say, why are we're arguing about petty things that the outside world doesn't care about? Let's grab these issues and run with them and do it. Stand up for what's
Go ahead, Richard.
I totally agree with Heath, and I just think this is a phenomenal question. I think the other issue that we're going to be facing, or that maybe 50 years from now, people will look back and say, why didn't the church say more about that, is the whole issue of gay marriage. And I think both of these issues, both with immigration and gay marriage, I feel like sometimes we think as a church we're afraid to say too much about it because we're going to be perceived as either too liberal on one side or too conservative on the other.
Yeah,
so we're afraid to really take a stand, and in the process, I mean, we're allowing other people to define the values of our nation.
But again, I think what Tony said to begin with is we've let political mindset come into this of
right.
Because when you say liberal, I think of politics. I think of liberal and conservative, and quit worrying about being a voting block and start doing.
Yeah, here's the extremes. Okay, so if I hold a position that just because someone's undocumented, they shouldn't be thrust out of the country, so all of a sudden for many people now I've just become very liberal. I mean, for my group.
Right
now. If I say that I'm against gay marriage, all of a sudden I become very conservative and close-minded, and so that's why I say we're driven by politics. We're not driven by principles, and it's easy to fall into that.
Well, I thought what you said last week in our seminar that we had at Family Camp. You said, "What is the heart of God on this issue?" And I don't think I think you're right. We've allowed the political rhetoric to define our position or stand, when we really need to step back as a church and say, what is the heart of God on this issue?
Right.
I don't, on any issue, but certainly on these two issues, and I don't think we're defining that very clearly.
I'll toss in real quickly Matt's answer. He says, I think right now, as I think about it, the thing that comes to my mind is our use of finances and resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, huge. Yeah,
so,
huge.
We'll just leave that there.
Yeah. No, and there's a book out that deals with that, and oh boy. I'll try to have it next week. It just eludes me. It just came out. Great book on that whole issue. In other words, what is it costing someone in another country so that we can get our latte for $3 at Starbucks? And this book deals with stuff like that. Wow. Very good.
That's a great question. I just thought, that's one of the best questions I've heard. I've talked to different people about your study and all, Tony, but I thought Matt's question. Then after that, I said, okay, that's how we need to be thinking.
Yeah. All right, here we're going to zoom towards the end. Let me just say thank you, buddy, for joining us again, and Richard for having you. Richard did a great job, and we clearly got to get you back on again. Heath, why don't you tell our listeners what's coming up here in the future?
We have a lot of great shows, as always. Next week, we have Dr. Steve Deneff and Dr. David Drury, who are both on staff at College Wesleyan in Marion, Indiana. They have a new book out, Soul Shift. This is a just phenomenal book. Talks about a lot of different things. They're going to be our special guests talking about their book. So if you've got any questions, you can email those to us. The week after that, we've got Dr. Bob Weitzel from Wesley Seminary, I believe, and Indiana Wesleyan University talking about his book, Waypoints. I'm about halfway through that book, and it's just very phenomenal. August 10th, Matthew DePrez from Frontline Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan is going to be here talking about intergenerational ministries. And then August 31st, Dr. Bob Cranston and Paige Cunningham will be talking about bioethics and today's Christian. 4 great shows coming up, and you don't want to miss them. Next week, we're actually going to be giving away a copy of Soul Shift to one of our listeners. We're giving away a bunch of stuff, so there's lots of reason to listen. And you could win.
Yeah, and about the giveaway for the book, Wesleyan Publishing House is sponsoring that giveaway. They have been gracious to partner with us, and in the future we're going to continue to feature some of their authors, and they will provide books for our listeners, and so I'm very excited about that. Again, we thank all of you for joining with us. If you want to do further research on anything we discussed today, you can find all the links to the stories we covered at our website, thetechnologyshow.com. For those of you that you listen to the show later, this message is probably going to be wasted, but because the boy Wonder is out of the studio today, the show is not going to get posted in a timely manner. We apologize for that, but the guy he left in charge is very inadequate in that space. And so what we're going to try to do is over the next 48 hours at least get the audio posted. And we apologize. If you want to contact us, please send your emails to thetechnologyshow@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail by calling us at 3049-TEOLOGY. That's 3049-TEOLOGY. Leave us a message. We may even play your comments on the air. Heath, is there anywhere on the internet our listeners can find you?
If they go to chaseyourline.com, they can find links to everywhere I'm at. I'm working on getting my Google Plus link up there, so that's the best place to find me.
All right, buddy.
Buddy R at scwesleyan.org.
Richard, where can people find you in cyberspace?
You can check out our church website at eden-church.org, and links to me are on there.
All right, and I think I've seen your face on the Channel 4 website where it shows the funny arrest pictures. So
don't say that.
That's not funny, Tony.
You can find me. You can find me at facebook.com/AKC64. Again, thanks for joining us. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
See you guys.